woman a few words, so I'll say this again and I'll back him up. He said we're one human race, so I'll take that further. One species, one planet. Let's take that shit back.
Hey, how many? He had like 2 hours speak, didn't he? He ready. He want to talk some more. Now we gotta keep it flowing. We love you, Portland, and like I said, we making some beautiful, beautiful changes. And you just need a round of applause and clap for yourself and pat yourself on the back and all the beautiful things for yourself. Because this is amazing. We have made history yet again, Portland. We are a template for all the cities to follow. Congratulations. The whitest city in America has made the biggest move for Black lives. Congratulations. You mean so much to the globe. Congratulations. You are amazing. Congratulations. You told me I mattered first. Congratulations. You told us we mattered really loud when we started to believe it. Congratulations. So I told this young man that he can, if he had patience, I'll let him say something. Now come on up here, and don't ask me again. All right, you got 30 seconds, man, to do what you do.
Look, I've been whitewashed. I'm not white. And I believe that Black lives matter, and that they're precious, and that the fact that our countries and people haven't treated their lives right points to the fact that we as humans have accepted treating each other terribly from the top down to egregious levels of disconcertion, which means we hinder our progress. When this guy talks about doing our research and not being complacent, he's talking about finding out our immortal souls, who we really are, and who's keeping us down. It's our shared oppressors. They're just the ones that are brave enough to stand up and be standing up through the oppression now. I can't imagine where they came from because I don't have an experience to relate to. But the fact that they brought everyone else inspired me to notice that we all got the power to make a change. I thought I'd just laid up top. I thought I'd never meet anyone that could make a change. But now I know that we all got it in ourselves. And I'm talking to people right now. I'm talking to these guys next to me to make a change, to put new laws in order, to get Trump out of office, to show that the grandeur of our character, we can strengthen ourselves and strengthen a new republic without arms and only with peace and love, like Martin Luther King. They've been treated. I don't even want to speak for them. Man, I have so much I owe to Black people. I've been listening to Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Duke Ellington, Jimi Hendrix, Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie, Fats Domino. It doesn't end. They inspire me. I play the damn trombone, and I love that. Look, he's being real when he says do your research. He's not playing. They keep the scope of what we know limited unless we take it upon ourselves to find out. And it's not external, we bring it external. It starts inside. That's what this is all about. I also want to add that this month in 1792, the damn French Revolution happened. This is that same energy. This is what they're commenting on. This is why y'all are all out here, right? This is change the economy. I got some quotes. One quote, it is wisdom above all that our guilty enemies would drive from the Republic. To wisdom alone, it is given to strengthen the prosperity of empires. It is for her to guarantee to us the rewards of our courage. Let us associate wisdom then with our enterprises. Just look up the quote. I got more to say, but I'm gonna let them take care of it. I've got to say my piece, and I hope y'all use your voice, get conscious, stand up for each other, stop being a stranger. Black lives matter. I believe Black lives are precious. I believe in divine life, and that's a way to live. All right?
Make some noise for him. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Who life matter? Who life matter? Who life matter? Black Lives Matter. Who life matter? Who life matter? Whose life matter? Say his name. Say his name. Say her name. Say her name. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. This is the energy I'm talking about. This young man jumping all over from there to there because he want to see change now. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's a good. This is why he's an example of why Portland is where it is right now with this race. He's an example of that. He's an example. You all are an example of why we're standing right here right now and we're making the moves that we're making. Let's continue to make these moves. Let's continue to make this even bigger. Bring the walls. I don't care. Bring all of them. Walls of moms, walls of dads, walls of kids, walls of grandpas, walls of grandmas, walls of dogs, walls of cats. I don't bring them all for this race. Let's do this thing. We love you.
Black Lives Matter. We ain't done. We ain't done. You know, I could go all day, man. I've been black a long time, y'all. A long time. We can keep talking. You know, man, I'm gonna tell you something. No disrespect to the other issues in the country. No disrespect to that at all. We got a lot of people going through a lot of things. You know? But my sexuality, nobody knows my sexuality when they look at me. I'm just saying. Nobody knows it. Those issues count. But Black Lives, the systematic destruction of black lives that they have been showing it to us on TV, y'all. You know, see, the trauma. See, I'm young, and maybe when you guys were young, your parents didn't have you watch it. You know, but we were told to look at it. You know, the images of slaves, the images of young men hanging from trees, being burnt with their limbs taken out, the stories, the horrible stories that were going on just, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, still going on today. You know, we're here. We're not going to stop being here. And we can't sum it all up in one night. We're not going to sum it up all up in one season. You got to be in this. You got to mess with this movement the long way. The long way. You see, they ain't clapping. The long way. If you are in it to win, fix your mind. Along with this, on this road is dangerous. They are going to try to talk about you. They're going to use the media to try to separate us. They're going to say all kinds of outlandish stuff. Some of the stuff is going to seep into your neighbors and your friends. You're going to see it. You're going to feel the pressure. I'm out of line. I shouldn't go back downtown. They know what I'm doing. You're going to feel it. That is natural. And if you are one of the people that can stand up against that type of pressure, then we'll see you here again tomorrow.
What are you proving, dude? Hey, what are you proving? That's city property. That's our fucking property. We paid for that shit. And they take it away from us. I thought the city was on our side. What are you proving? Feds. What are you proving, guys?
These macro policy type concerns of this past week, and the week as a whole is set for pretty strong gains for all three of the indices, in July particularly strong.
Yep.
Still to come, Dr. Scott Gottlieb on this morning's top coronavirus headlines. Of course, we mentioned futures higher today, largely because of those tech names, but CAT helping the Dow as well with their numbers. There they are for you, expecting a massive gain for the NASDAQ at the open and a healthy gain for the other indices too. We're back in a couple minutes.
Keep up with the crisis, volatility, relief efforts, economic impact. Understand what's moving and why. Squawk on the Street on CNBC.
Being different has been a constant in Jin Jing's life and career. Born male, she was recognized as a child prodigy and was admitted into a prestigious dance troupe within the People's Liberation Army, aged just 9. She became a decorated colonel and China's #1 male dancer. But then her life took a different path. It was while studying dance in New York that she began her transition to female. And upon returning to China, she became the first public figure to undergo gender reassignment surgery.
But that time, people have no way to give any opinions. Everybody step back. Everybody step back and just somehow, in a way, helps me to be who I am in the quite an empty space and a vulnerable position. But that time I tell myself, that's already good enough.
Welcome back to Squawk Box, everybody. There is concern of a potential second COVID wave across the globe. Earlier this week, China reported its highest number of daily cases since April. Hong Kong announced new restrictions amid a rise in infections. Japan reported a new daily record this week, and numbers in Spain and France are increasing. Also, the UK's health minister Dr. Gottlieb, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. You and I were texting back and forth earlier this week, and I know you've tweeted a little bit about this. We're seeing a rise in places in Asia and Europe, but you think that there's a real risk that there's going to be a decoupling between the United States and the rest of the globe. Do you want to explain that theory?
Well, we're seeing it right now. If you're an American, you really can't travel to too many places around the world. The United States is one of only a handful of countries where the travel, large countries, where the travel into Europe and Asia is fully restricted to American consumers right now. It's hard. You can't go to Europe. You can't go to China right now if you're an American. And I think when you look at these other countries, what you're seeing right now are some outbreaks in some of these regions. Some of these countries are having isolated outbreaks. It remains to be seen whether or not they're going to be able to control that. They're taking pretty aggressive action, and there is some presumption that they will be able to control these outbreaks, that they're not going to have very dense epidemics heading into the fall and the winter, because they got the virus down to very low levels, and now they have the means in place with testing, with tracking and tracing, to try to keep the infection at bay. Now, that remains to be seen, but if they can't do it, it's going to be very hard, for example, for states in the United States that have gotten virus down to very low levels to similarly try to keep the virus there and not have very large epidemics heading into the fall. But I do think right now, when you look around the world, you are seeing the United States get decoupled from other countries in terms of our experience, and that could ultimately translate into lost opportunities for Americans relative to the rest of the world.
Lost opportunities like what?
Well, slower GDP growth, the risk that we tip back into a recession when the rest of the world's growing, inability of the bulk of our students to go back to in-class learning for the whole fall and winter, lost business opportunities because we can't travel abroad while Europeans are allowing travel within Europe and Asia's allowing travel within Asia. So, you know, the United States is being isolated from the rest of the world right now. There's basically a cordon that's been put around the United States for most countries that we would normally be engaging with much more closely. I think we really haven't paid a lot of attention to that for now because there's not a lot of places we want to go. But you know, as things evolve, and if the rest of the world is able to keep this at bay and they just contend with outbreaks, but they don't really have dense epidemics, and they're able to get back to more of their normal way of life, I think the disparity is going to look sharper, because I don't think that we're going to be able to crush this epidemic heading into the fall and winter. I think a best case scenario right now is we have sort of a rotating
under control. You think it's too late for that?
I don't think it's too late, but I think you need to do it on a national basis. You need a more uniform approach. I think that the combination of people wearing masks, closing down certain congregate venues, limiting the size of gatherings within a state, and people just being far more vigilant, I think that combination may be effective enough at keeping the virus at bay and slowly bringing the virus under control in places where it's epidemic. That's probably what's taking place in Arizona. When you look at Arizona, they really haven't taken very aggressive policy actions, and they took it late. But you do see the cases starting to come down in Arizona, and by and large, what they've done is close certain congregate settings like bars, limited capacity in restaurants. People have become more vigilant in that state, and you've seen more uniform adherence to masks, or at least you're starting. Approach to it nationally, because you can't have some states adhering to it, other states becoming epidemic, and then those states becoming the vehicles by which you seed the states where you've really brought down the virus.
Andrew, you had a question?
Yeah, Doctor, talking about national testing and a more national program, I wanted to ask you about a story that appeared in Vanity Fair, and I know that you've been in touch with the White House over many months during this period, so I was curious if you could weigh in on it. Apparently, there was a group led by Jared Kushner in the months of March and April developing effectively a national testing program, being able to surge testing to different states, being able to get PPE to different places on a very national basis. That plan was leaked to the magazine. They read it. They went through it. Were you aware of it? Do you know exactly what happened to it? Because, of course, it was later shelved, in part because the president decided that testing was not in his political favor at that time.
Well, that's a good reporter. She used to cover FDA, so I know her. I think that the contours of that story are accurate. I can't vouch for all the details of the story. I did read it. I think that there was a plan that was being developed. You know, I had some awareness of that. I think certain elements of that plan were implemented. The plan tried to nationalize the market, if you will, for testing and create more national coordination around testing. Certain aspects of the supply chain for testing, getting reagents, pipettes, that really was nationalized in a way in that the government did take steps to try to increase more supply and move those supplies around the country. So in some respects, certain elements of that was implemented. In other respects, I think the report is absolutely right. Other elements of that plan were not implemented, particularly around trying to create a national market for samples and really a national market for the testing services themselves. What we have really are state markets for testing services, and whether or not you have capacity in your state depends on what labs you have in your state. And the really only swing national capacity, if you will, is Quest and LabCorp and BioReference Labs, the large commercial labs that are able to have some excess capacity and move it into states that become epidemic. So, for example, LabCorp is doing about 180,000 tests a day right now. That was as of the weekend. They probably ramped it up. They've now swung a lot of that capacity into the South because that's where the epidemic is. So that's really only the only swing capacity we had. The plan envisioned trying to create a pool of capacity and move it around and coordinate it nationally. That really hasn't been done.
Hey, Scott, just on that point, if we have this swing capacity and it gets taken to where the outbreaks are, does that mean we have less testing in the areas where we think it's calm and under control, and therefore maybe we'll have less notice?
Who's going to join us with a look at some of the less talked about items on the table. You got to hear about them. We'll tell you all about it when Squawk Box returns right after this.
Cycle. What companies are doing now to diversify and bridge the divide.
Then is anything going to change?
Corporate Insight, Smart Solutions, Squawk Alley.
She's a Hollywood action hero.
I actually realized the impact I would have on people. And as an actress, as a celebrity, you might have power.
A passionate environmentalist.
Like many of you, I deeply care about climate change.
Li Bingbing, one of China's biggest stars, joins me on CNBC Meets Defining Values.
tucked away in that GOP proposal that would allow for a 100% deduction of business lunches. Robert Frank joins us with that and so much more. Robert.
Half of those client-related meals, but the new proposal, sponsored by Senator Tim Scott, would allow companies to deduct all of their client-related meal costs. Now, Scott's saying it would lead to more orders, take-home pay, and hours for wait staff and kitchen staff. President Trump has been calling for this deduction since April after a call with celebrity chefs Wolfgang Puck and Thomas Keller. But opponents call it a subsidy for the 3-martini lunch. Now, it would cost the government an estimated $2 to $3 billion a year, and economic studies show little impact on restaurant receipts the last time that deduction was changed. Now, Kyle Pomerlau of the American Enterprise Institute says it's the virus, not the lack of a tax break, that's keeping people from restaurants. He adds that more permissive treatment of business meals and entertainment would make it easier to disguise personal consumption as business expenses, guys. And I know a lot is up in the air on this bill right now. This is one of those small pieces that both sides have kind of
can discount, offset 50% of the cost of something that's client-facing. There's no upward limit on that, so that applies the same if you want to go to a Michelin-starred restaurant versus to McDonald's?
Lavish and extravagant, but that is the guidance. And they also have required you to take out beverages from the bill so you can get a meal, but you're not supposed to include the 3-martini lunch.
That was my question. Can you do alcohol, or is that extravagant? And by the way, who drinks at lunch anymore?
Yeah, nobody drinks, let alone the 3-martini lunch. Yeah,
I would hope the Squawk Box team drinks at lunch. When I was on WEX, I used to have the occasional drink at lunch. The closing bell, only very occasionally.
That's you, Wolf.
Hey, Robert. The big question, I want to know, does takeout count? Because in a COVID era, if we're really trying to help folks, these restaurants, does takeout count? So does this include catering to your home, if that's where it is?
Yes, absolutely. So it's both if you're a business owner and you're meeting with a client, as well if you have employers or employees rather that are being catered because they have to be at work, that is counted as well. And that is part of what Scott's point is here. This would lead to more delivery and takeout as well, not just eating in restaurants.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come, Apple, Facebook and Amazon shares are all popping this morning. We'll talk to an investor about whether there's more room to run. That's next.
Squawk on the Street takes you inside market-moving earnings.
Whamma jamma. Whamma jamma.
Head-turning deal-making.
It's a SPAC world, we're just living in it.
Weekdays.
The pandemic has disrupted economies worldwide. A double whammy. The coronavirus pandemic, and a spat between two major oil producers, Saudi Arabia and Russia. At the start of 2020, demand for oil around the world plunged, but oil-producing countries continued to generate the commodity at a surplus. In April, the unimaginable happened when US oil prices went into negative territory for the first time, which meant sellers were paying buyers to offload oil. While oil prices have rebounded slightly, it is likely that the oil industry will have to adjust to a new normal in the years ahead.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. A blowout quarter for big tech. Amazon reported a record profit. Facebook forecasting growth, ad growth that is. Apple crushing the estimates, now splitting its stock 4-1. That's going to happen at the end of next month. And then Alphabet reported better than expected results, though overall sales fell. Our next guest owns all four. Howard Ward is Chief Investment Officer for Growth Equities at GAMCO. His GAMCO Global Growth Fund is a 5-star fund at Morningstar and was named the top global large cap growth fund for the past 10 years by Lipper in 2019 and 2020. So, Howard, the question is, given where the stocks of these companies are living right now, and we can talk about some of the multiples and the like, and how well they're performing, whether you still buy in from here.
Good morning, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I will give you two answers to that. I can't really help someone who wants to be a short-term trader because that's not what I do, and that's not our time horizon. But if you're an investor and you're looking for something to own for the next 3 to 5 years, you absolutely can be comfortable buying these stocks today. I will admit that I am amazed at how well these stocks have done over the years. And the quarters that were put up yesterday, particularly by Amazon and Apple, were simply astounding in some respects. Facebook was no slouch either. And Google, of course, beat estimates, but they did take a little bit of a hit with to the advertising side. On a platform, but it owns the high end of the smartphone market and related technologies. And so I don't see anything that's going to disturb the growth path that these companies are on for the next several years. I'm sure over time, the situation will become more complicated. But right now, these companies are in fact dominant in the platforms, which for the most part, they created. Right. And my hat's off to Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook and others.
Howard, if you have, I mean, we talk about them as a collective, and maybe we should in certain ways, but in other ways, they're all very different businesses with very different issues and, frankly, very different multiples. One of the points that Wilf was making just in the past half hour is on a multiple basis, you could argue that Google is cheap, or at least much cheaper. How do you stack, if you will, these four companies if you're a long-term investor?
Well, it's funny. You're right. They have different multiples. I think that in each case, the stocks are very defensible when you get into the cash flow metrics. But let's talk about the valuation question, because when you look at Amazon in particular, Amazon is a stock that people philosophy of foregoing short-term profits. I think that has turned out very well for him, and I think there's a lesson in there, not only for other companies and their approach to managing their businesses, but it's a lesson for investors as well, because investors that took that long-term ride with Jeff Bezos have done very well. And I could really make the same case for these other companies. Valuation is not a factor determining equity performance, not a factor at all. And in the world of growth stocks, that's probably more true than in the world of value stocks. But I think valuation in some respects takes up too much of the energy in the space. The focus really should be on more of these growth metrics and how strong the moats are that these companies have.
Right. Howard, real quick before we go, if you weren't going to buy any of these four stocks, or maybe if you were, but you wanted to add on one or two other names outside of this group, who do you love right now on your 3 to 5 year time horizon?
in the world of online software. So ServiceNow, clearly, and I think Adobe is the other one. Both of these companies are big free cash flow generators and dominant in their respective fields, with much the same kind of runway that these four monsters have. And of course, you still can't dismiss Microsoft. Microsoft is actually our biggest position. We haven't added to it for years, but it has done as a stock about as well as Apple has for the last 10 years. I think that might be a surprise to some people. But Microsoft is, number